Hey there, guys. Chris Castle, Rabbit Guy, Rabbit Hole Diaries. I mentioned my grandfather a lot in these diaries, and I want to go into more detail about Grandpa. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about everything else in that house because my mom was the oldest of, I believe, 6 girls and 1 son that my grandfather had. And my mother's parents divorced, and I'm not going to get into that. It's not relevant. My mom stayed with my grandfather, and I'm going to focus these diaries on that side of the family and pretty much ignore the other side of the family at this point, even though I know my grandmother on my mother's side was also of Jewish lineages. That's not relevant to these stories, because what's relevant is a special relationship that I had with my grandfather. And the reason for that is I was raped as a child. I was like 3 years old, maybe 4. This pervert raped me. A neighbor. The family was like well known for babysitters, but the rub of all this, the guy got away with it. I remember going to court, and they sat the biggest, whitest state cop, some old guy. He gave me a candy. I believe it was a Ludens. I always loved Ludens cherry lozenges as a child. It was something like that. Delicious. He tried to block my view, and I remember seeing the lawyers talk it out and prosecute this case, but the guy got away with it because his mother swore he was sick that day and never left the house. And Chris must have been lying. And since an early age, I've been assaulted, and pretty much teased as abused and called a liar. Not only a liar, but hey man, all you guys out there suffering hate, I have never been remotely gay, but my whole life I've been treated as a homosexual and an outcast because many people knew what that guy did to me. I mean, as a little kid, after I got away from him, when he left me and I managed to escape from that barn that's no longer there, I went running, screaming down the street looking for my mama. Miracle I didn't get hit by a car crossing that major road. I lived in that house most of my life until I sold it in 2018. All my life I had to deal with that, and I could have turned out to be a really horrible person. But God has blessed me. And the reason why He's blessed me is because I have a purpose. And that purpose started with my grandfather. So this episode is the Rabbit Guy's grandfather. Grandpa. He would always teach me everything about nature. I remember going once at the time, like the only mall in Jackson, Michigan, the Westwood Mall. And there was like a mole track, you know how they crumble up the earth and you can see that little trail that they make, and it was full of ants. And being a child, for whatever reason, I stepped on it and was disturbing it, and Grandpa stopped me and he said, "Christopher, why are you doing that?" I said, "No, they're ants, Grandpa." He said, "Those ants are very important. Don't disturb them. They're busy at work and making sure that they're okay, and they're cleaning up all kinds of stuff of dead insects and garbage and things, and they eat it. Just leave the ants alone." And that was my grandpa. He took me under his wing, especially after that incident, man, when I was such a little boy. But his house wasn't such a great house either. I mean, I never had a issue in that house other than dreams and visions as a child. Always had one where I was floating in space and I was like in a traffic lane full of boards. And that dream was like a repetitive dream all through my childhood, and I'll never forget it because it had like a undescribable taste associated with it. Almost like welding fumes. Astronauts out there probably understand the taste I'm talking about. Anybody that's actually been exposed to space and come back in through the airlock. That whiff you get off your suit. Spot like that. It's not quite welding fumes, but I imagine it's probably what space smells like. I've smelled it. I smelled it in dreams. I had that dream so much in my grandpa's house. Always having visions there. Now, it was grandpa that told me about Hanukkah. And it was always stories and stuff and special time with grandpa. I spent so much time in that house, I practically grew up there. It's not there anymore. It was on Locust Street, of all places. Locust and Walnut. In an area called Frogtown in Jackson, Michigan. And all of Frogtown at one time was my relatives. The Nastalis and Muskowskis were related. And it's a large family. And even though we've got a history of being considered Polacks or Polish, actually the nation was Prussia when my ancestors left there in the early 1900s. And I always thought my grandpa was born there, but looking back and thinking about these more and more and more, because it's been so long of these stories, he was the eldest from his father, and he lived to be 78. So he couldn't have possibly have been born in Prussia. And I got an approximate idea how old he lived because my oldest son actually remembers meeting him when he was like 4 years old, shortly before he died, and he was 78. So around 1993, I guess, he died when he was 78. You can just do the math back to when he was born. The family didn't originally come to Jackson. They started out in Chicago. And for whatever reason, they came to Jackson in like the early days of like the boom, building cars and stuff. And it's always been a family of engineers for a very long time until somebody stole it. I had a German silver nickel, cool little fold out 6-inch measuring device with little caliper and stuff. It was stamped and dated like 1907. It was my grandfather's, and somebody stole it over the course of time. Love that thing. My grandpa was an old man before he would finally break down and go to the doctor. He got sick and he thought he was going to die, and finally family managed to drag him into a doctor, and they found out just that he didn't have a thyroid. They couldn't figure out how he kept kicking. How he kept kicking is kind of the same way I keep kicking, because God wanted him to keep kicking. And I thought I was going to be teaching a lot of this stuff to my grandson, but I'm seeing every sign I was raised from a small child to observe. And he told me to never stop studying because it would change. And he's right. Everything has changed. The encyclopedias I grew up reading were like 1960s and 70s. And compare them to today, and the story changes. The knowledge changes. Even now, the physicists are realizing that they don't have a clue. You want to know how that magnetar can just light up all the antennas at once, like with a direct blast? Because God is trying to get your attention. The only equation you need to figure out how that can possibly happen is to consider that the galaxy is sentient, just like the Mayan calendar says the central figure. It's just another angel. That's not actually even God, but that's as close as God that we're getting anytime soon. The souls. And if you believe in God, this is the ultimate purpose of Jesus, folks. I love the man and the miracles that I truly believe he did. Ultimately, the Jews rejected him and were powerless to do anything about it, so they had the Romans deal with it. But it served God's purpose in the end. And there's enough left in even the most edited of Bibles for people to know that God is real, but you got to kind of take your eyes away from the guy that was rejected and murdered. That you think God wanted him to be murdered so you can do whatever you want in his name, and it's okay because you believed in Jesus and went to church and got baptized, that it's all right to just do what you want and turn a blind eye and be gluttonous and everybody's got their own different thing. My biggest fault is drinking beer, which ain't actually a sin, or Jesus could never turn water to wine. And cannabis, which I believe is one of the 14 trees that they showed Enoch because he loved the pleasing smell of it and all that. And marijuana is the only psychoactive substance known to mankind with no lethal dose. And I prefer it highly concentrated. And I'm not sharing my recipe. This is the stuff I smoke. I use this pipe and this soldering iron, and I just put my little wax right there on the edge, and you can see that's like full of it. And every now and then I can just warm this up with a little rack I got, and it'll all drip out. 1 gram lasts me about a month, and I make it myself for pennies on the dollar. And you see how amber and thick that is. Got this bowl at a Myers, but I'm sure they got them at Walmart. $15, I made 10 grams of it. It'll last me 3 months for $15. And I don't take any pills except rarely some Tylenol. Oh, I could take opiates. Almost got addicted to that shit. Kind of went around with it. And walked away from it. Done pretty much everything to mankind. And just look at my medical records. How about the time that I took like a massive quantity of LSD and survived? Because I can't die until it's my time and I have a message. And because I have died once and was educated about this When I absolved myself of all my sins in them woods that night, God is real. The angels are real. That white orb was my watcher, and we all got one. And they watch and they take notes, folks. Check me out on Facebook. Look me up on Name Test, Chris Castle. White shirt in the woods with the blue face mask. Kind of got to make that a point over and over again for people that just watch this video. Look at my name test and read them. I did 10 of them and I quit doing them when I started getting a repeating message. Because it about nailed me to a T. And anybody that researches into that would know that those things are incredibly accurate. I'm your best friend. Okay? But the sad truth is God is not the God of fairy tales and wishes. There's 8 billion people on the planet and we're destroying the place. And there's got to be a reckoning. And the lawless and sinners go first. Think about that. And consider the fact that God is real. It's not just a figment of ancient hokey religions. Enoch gave his book to his son Methuselah. They're both highly regarded in every Bible, but they don't want people reading this book because it's a doomsday prophecy. But it doesn't have to be a doom if you believe in God. If you believe in God, you'll see the truth. And stop denying everything, that it's not real, like them giant skulls and Paracas, the Nazca, the shaved off mountains that look like things, and the figures that can only be seen from the air. And they're trying to write that all off as some bullshit and trying to deny the histories of India and the Vimanas and the wars that they were having that's pretty much repeated in every religion. And they just deny and deny and deny and deny and deny because we're so superior. But are we really? What have Caucasian Europeans accomplished? We helped educate the Chinese so they could speed up global warming, and even though we tried to put on the brakes, we wouldn't accept electric cars and solar panels and all this other stuff that we could do, that we could be devoting more money for, but because we have a capitalistic society that favors capitalism, that has allowed billionaires to accumulate $3.5 trillion of personal wealth while the nation is almost $30 trillion in debt, that's the problem. And judging by the way Trump can't even get a glass up to his lips without a little help from his other hand, and the fact he gave Israel everything they wanted, and everybody's known a lot of truly deeply religious, like the pastor types out there would tell you, they got to try to build that temple a third time. And I keep saying trying, and they're like, oh no, they're not going to try. They're going to build it. And I'm telling you, they're going to try. Because I read the script. It's a big script. It talks about the time when we drink God's waters with unending thirst. And next time I'm going to talk about God's waters. Chris Castle, Rabbit Guy. Hope you enjoy. I hope more intelligent people get a peek at these occasionally. And not judge me about my invokings and stuff, because once I do that, I can't undo that. And I got to answer to God about that. But I can look up. Book of Enoch says a curse can't look to God. I ain't cursed, I'm blessed. Blessed to know the truth and blessed to even be alive through several miraculous events. And nobody wants to believe. Peace. Name test is real. What's your name test say?